And welcome to this episode of the Good Citizen Podcast. Great to have on an individual I consider a friend, a partner in ministry, Frank Baldwin from Muncie Mission right here in Indiana. Muncie Mission is an incredible ministry. We're going to get into all of that, comprehensive, strategic, and I would say impacting, changing its zip code. And so talking about how to change your zip code, we often talk about most Christians are going to have their greatest impact in their zip code. So how can you maximize that impact? I think Muncie Mission is a great example of that. So, Frank, thanks for joining us today. If you would just jump in, maybe just a brief intro about your background and what's your current position there.
Yeah, so my current position is president and CEO of the Muncie Mission. Been here 10 years, actually this month, and came from my journey to this desk. Started in Alaska, through Colorado, Florida, through various employment career changes, and ultimately led us to Muncie.
Well, Indiana can get cold, maybe not Alaska cold, but glad you're here. I do joke with folks sometimes that our weather is kind of schizophrenic. It'll be, 31 day and 65 the next, and there's no way your body can keep up with all of that. But
right.
Yeah, Muncie is one of these cities in the Midwest that a lot of these factories in the early 90s, the 2000s, where those industries left. And a lot of these cities, I might even say the cities has struggled with its identity, because you're a manufacturing center, and then what's new, what's next? And with all of that, you have a lot of brokenness. You have sometimes turning to addiction. And the Muncie Mission has been there to help folks, and looking forward to getting into all the various ways and helping listeners think through, hey, maybe I can grab one of these ideas here, implement it in my ministry. So how long has the Muncie Mission been there? And do you have a brief kind of recent story or success story that you could share with the listeners?
Yeah, so we do a number of services. We've been serving in Muncie since 1930. So we've been around for a while. I'm the fourth CEO of the Muncie Mission, so it's had some long stability in its.
That's amazing. Since 1930, only four. Wow,
only four, and but it's a great organization. I just received. It was just about 2 weeks ago. Received a comment through our website, and it was from a young lady who last year or 2 years ago had, when the temperatures were extremely cold, we opened up the lobby of the mission. And while our residence serves only men, we knew that there were females on the street, there were couples on the street. And so we would open our lobby up at night for individuals to come in for some respite. We'd provide some meals and a place for them to remain warm during the night. There was this young couple who was really intriguing. They were just drifting. They were lost. There was no purpose in their life. They were sleeping on the floor. They were using in the bathroom. We'd go in. There would be needles and spoons, and it was just a very difficult environment or situation in our environment. And so in talking with the couple, realized they had no support in Indiana at all, that they had just drifted here from Tennessee. And so we cared for them the best we could, and then purchased a ticket for them back to Tennessee to be with their support network, a bus ticket, and then lost track of them. 2 weeks ago, she sent a comment and said, I just want you to know the rest of the story.
Oh, wow.
And after she got back to Tennessee, she was able to get help and support, break her addiction, move back to her family, which was in Texas, and is living a clean and sober life, involved with a healthy network. She, which in her case was a church. She got involved with church and had a transformation. And it just started by offering some respite from the cold. On a cold winter night to someone that we normally didn't serve. I just, there's stories like that we hear all the time, but it was really wonderful hearing the outcome a first door. Sometimes you plant the seed, right, and you don't really see the outcome, and we're just so thankful for that opportunity.
So I imagine ministry leaders, committed Christians that are listening to this, that we often are planting those seeds and don't always see the result, but just being the hands and feet of Jesus. And it would have been very easy to certainly give up on those individuals, they're using, and get out of, what are we going to do? But just loving them as Christ did, and give them that push. So that's incredible. And just one example of what the Muncie Mission is doing. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the mission has been there for some time, but is very strategic. And so would you just quickly maybe roll through what are the various initiatives of the mission, and how do you help someone that's wrestling with addiction, or maybe homelessness, maybe mental health issues? How do you help that person go from maybe being destitute or even on the street to being somebody that finds their identity in Jesus and is a productive member of society? If you could kind of just walk through that with us.
So our services are strategically designed to align with our mission statement, which is providing compassionate relief, leading to life transformation through the gospel of Christ. And so we focus on compassionate relief initially. And, I just envisioned this funnel. So you have a wide mouth at the funnel, right? Mm-hmm. And we try to extend the arms of Christ and wrap around this community by offering every day a community meal. Anyone in the community can receive a nutritious meal at the mission. They receive an opportunity to connect with someone and just feed the hungry. We also provide for families that are struggling through our family service department, utility relief, clothing distribution, food, and just community support. We collaborate with so many partners, and we'll refer and try to case manage families into out of their crises. Also, a medical clinic. 2 years ago, we opened a free medical clinic at the mission. It's staffed by volunteer physicians and nurses, and we are serving residents and the public at the mission. And then
could I drill down into that one just a little bit? Because I've seen some ministries elsewhere actually launch these clinics because there is kind of a healthcare desert, and you're going to be in urban Muncie and in a place where there's a good bit of homelessness. I'm sure that was not a light lift to start that, but have you seen a lot of people take advantage of that?
Yes. So the reason that we started, Josh, was as through the mission, I was seeing so many individuals coming through that we were involved with on a daily basis with extreme health issues that were untreated. Now, for whatever reason, we could not connect them with healthcare providers, mostly because of distrust or on the patient's part, or maybe a mental health issue that prevented them from whatever it was to enter the doors of the great medical services that are provided in our community. And so we felt if we could leverage our relationship with these individuals to involve them with healthcare and begin to address some of their health needs, then we would be, again, doing the ministry of Christ. So I initially talked with our hospital. I talked with some other healthcare providers about opening an office within the mission, and that just didn't work out for funding purposes and various reasons. That did not work out. And so in this, we really took this to prayer and prayed for a number of years that we could find a solution for this untreated healthcare of homeless individuals or people suffering from addiction that would not utilize the systems that were already offered in a community. And so we wasn't long, several years, a physician approached me and he said, "Listen, I'm retiring.
Hmm.
He was young. He was in his 50s. Okay. He said, I'm retiring. I don't need an income, nor do I want an income. But the Lord has called me to provide free health care to the
Wow.
poor.
Oh,
Would the
wow.
mission be
Wow.
interested in working with him? And
Let me
so
think
we
about
did.
that for a second. Yes.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It was like, this is an answer. This is the
Yeah,
answer
there it
we've
is.
been
Yeah, it's
praying for.
amazing how
Right.
God puts those pieces together. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, I was just interested in the clinic, and then so what's that next piece?
Yeah. So, and then we also offer over in the next county, Madison County, offer a home for women. It's called Beauty for Ashes, and it's a home for women and children. That is a 6 to 18 month housing program. It braces women where they are, and through some classes and case management and counseling, change their life and empower them to work toward a more positive future. Then right here in Muncie, and at the core of what we do is that path of really or of beginning transformation. And it starts at the Muncie Hub. The Muncie Hub is a day center for actively homeless people. Showers are provided, laundry is provided, there's food that is provided, there's case management, and it has become the state of Indiana's housing entry point in Region 6. So it covers a 6-county region. So in ICTA, the state of Indiana, Indiana Housing, Indiana, Indiana Community Development Housing Authority. Um, this is the entry point. So if anyone is needing housing, they go through the hub first. And then we collaborated with other providers, and there's housing staffing specialists. There's Meridian Health has several staff members that have grants and funding that help cover some of the expenses of getting housed. And through the hub, we also have there are tiny homes for the hardest to shelter, which is generally untreated mental health issues. And so we can put them into tiny homes, provide case management and care for them.
So I wanted to drill down onto this one, because sometimes with talking with Christians, like, oh, I've heard of a mission that provides some of these services, individuals that are experiencing homelessness, meals, that sort of thing. But where I began, as I was talking with you, began just to see these innovative, like the medical clinic. And then my understanding was the hub run by the city, and then the city approached Muncie Mission to take it over, or what was the history there?
Yeah, so the hub was ran by another nonprofit that was funded by the city and state. And in 2019, they began to have some financial issues. And so the city director of community development approached myself and one of our healthcare providers and several agencies to come together to convene and try to find a solution. How can we save this organization? So we strengthened their governance by recommending some people to go on their board. The new board convened. They met one time and said, "There's no hope. This place is going to close. There's no way to bail it out." And so at that time, the city asked if the mission would be willing to assume that property and that operation. And I knew that it was going to be significant additional operating costs to us that we really weren't prepared for. And I said, well, I will on if we can on this contingency that the other agencies that are working with me will come alongside. We'll all work out at the same building. It will be a multi-agency approach instead of a single agency approach. We'll work together. The city will help fund, and we can make this work. and it was a new idea. None of us, everybody had been working in their silos for years. And so this was a completely new and risky idea to bring agencies together, to, at least in our area. It's been done in other cities and other places, but in our area, that was a risk, and we did it, and we've been committed, and we've been meeting every single week with the city and the CEOs of these other agencies. We meet every Monday morning. And through this, it has led to developing an entire strategy for approaching homelessness and ensuring that they are proper services in the continuum of care. So it's been really good.
Yeah, and this is exactly what I wanted to drill down on, because it's amazing. All of the traditional mission operations. Again, we could spend this entire podcast talking about that. I mean, these are real people having to fund all of that, keep it all going. It's amazing. But then you take over a already kind of failing effort, and then you begin partnering with the city. You begin partnering with other nonprofits. I know some ministry leaders would have a mindset of, I'm not going to go do that. Like, I'm not going to partner with those folks. So what led you, maybe conversation with your boards, or what gave you the comfort level or the confidence to say, hey, we're going to step out of maybe the more traditional role into this partnership with the city to then have this strategic plan? So maybe just, what was your thought process there? How did you jump into that?
Well, it certainly was an evolution, and that one is I wanted to represent the body of Christ very well. I wanted to be faithful, but I also was growing disillusioned with going to church, and of course I'm a church member, elder, so I had strong value for church, but I was growing. There was some discontent with, we're not really reaching the lost. It's, if they come to us, then we'll disciple them. But and yes, we had a missionary budget, and yes, we send missionaries on mission trips and so forth. But what are we doing to really affect our community? And in this position, I also had, just by the nature of my position, had been involved in some leadership councils and leadership groups within the community. And I saw that the 80-20 rule really is so true, that 20% of the population is doing all the work. And so as I was going to all these housing initiatives and mental health and addiction and all the meetings, it was the same people. It was the same people. And I became the lone voice, I felt, for gospel-centered ministry. And I'd look around and say, where are the believers? Because this place is dominated by unbelievers. Then I read a book, actually, that you wrote, Josh. Somebody gave me Good Citizen.
By the way, I wasn't fishing for that, but
I know you weren't. I know you weren't.
This book by some guy.
I didn't know you at the time, but I read the book, and it really began to. It was exactly what I was looking for at that time, and it answered some questions. And I began to think about Daniel in Babylon, who, although he was in a hostile government, rose to a level of prominence. So, what were some of the decisions that Daniel made? He obviously had to wrestle with some issues, I believe. My earpiece keeps falling out. Sorry. And so, but that book challenged me and to get into the arena, to just go. I was in it, but to really become involved in the arena. So I started thinking, well, all right, I'm in these meetings. I see that there's a lot of money being spent to address issues that doesn't include the full solution. Okay.
Yeah.
There has to be a faith component, and that is missing. And I also knew that as a believer, and as my experience in the church, we tended to shy away from any involvement with the government because, let's face it, they would want to dictate. They wanted the gospel removed. There were they put restrictions that limited that.
Mm-hmm.
And I started thinking, but the government's going to spend the money. So who then is going to be the voice that the person seeking assistance hears? Is it going to be the voice of the person who has no concept of God, offers no hope in that way? They can offer material resources, but there are no additional sources. And so I began to talk to my board about that. And that was our question. Who will be the voice that these people are hearing? Desperate,
Yeah.
lovely, wonderful people. And from that decision, we felt like we had an obligation then to change our position on how we viewed government funding, how we viewed collaborating with the government. We had to do things. We carved out, portions of our program that could be eligible for funding that wouldn't interfere with our greater purpose and objective. So that's how we begin that process.
Yeah, and so I did want to just mention that the mindset shift there is, all right, if I partner with government, I'm going to have to jeopardize gospel-centered ministry. And I think what the general idea here is, well, we're still going to be cautious, and I know that your ministry is very sophisticated, strong legal protections, but we're going to look at it kind of project-based. And if we can collaborate on something without jeopardizing our statement of faith, without jeopardizing our gospel witness, then let's lean into that. Maybe the easier way to do it is just, nope, I'm not going to participate. But then, as you said, there are those opportunities, and what are you going to do with them? Especially when the city comes to you and says, "Will you help us with the hub?"
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things, Josh, that we did is I would look for services and organizations and initiatives where our values overlapped. They might not align, but worked in that space where they overlapped. So if it was providing immediate relief for a homeless or hungry person or someone with addiction, we would work in that space together. Sure. And that's our approach.
And that's with that partnership piece, longtime listeners know step 3, offer solutions for partner with government to solve key problems. It is, I will partner with just about anybody that's going to be helping kids in foster care, helping with some of those physical needs, as long as I'm able to be who I'm called to be in that space. And so thank you for digging into that just a little bit. I know it's a little bit off of some of the questions we asked, but I think that's so helpful for ministry leaders as they're thinking through it. And then when an opportunity falls in your lap like that, and now Muncie Mission, I hope listeners keyed into that, every week is meeting with city leadership to determine what do we do about this. I just think of the church serving its way back to the center of the city. That's what it looks like. And I'm so grateful for your example. Now, a stat you shared in a recent meeting.
Josh.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Let me interrupt you there because it's led to places of influence that I would have never imagined. Because as we began to work with the city and we partnered with the other agencies, then we also had to begin working with the state. And all federal HUD money that addresses housing and homelessness flows through ICTA in the state of Indiana. Okay, all of that, and then they distribute the money to 14 or 15 regions, including Indianapolis is outside of they're their own continuum of care. There are 14 regions in what is called the balance of state, and I was appointed as chair for Region 6, so I chair that and also serve on a service provision committee with the state of Indiana, which really sets policy and guidelines for how homelessness is addressed. And so
Oh,
um, taking that step out has opened other doors that in the past we did not participate because it was so hostile. It was openly hostile to us. And now we're at the table participating.
wow.
And so it's opened new doors and
Well, and
influence.
thank you for pausing because that's right. It's not just city, and I didn't even know the extent of that. That's amazing, Frank, that you are having a believer that's not just, hey, we got to get these people out of the cold, but like how do we help transform their lives? And the state does that to some degree, but again, you can't pay for purpose. You can't legislate hope. That's what the church does. And so thank you for your example. And along those lines, in a recent meeting with Key Leader in Indiana, you shared a stat that, if I heard it correctly, just blew me away. Something like a 98% success rate in helping people overcome addictions if they walk through kind of the entire program. So would you go into when I first visited, this had begun, and when I came back again, like this was fully operational. My understanding is 44 properties that Muncie Mission has bought around the mission to provide community. So this was incredibly innovative. Would you dig into kind of the genesis of buying up the properties and that stat, which I thought was just incredible?
So so in addition to the hub, we offer emergency shelter and then a long-term residential addiction program. For many years, that was the extent of our services, the emergency shelter and the residential program. And when I came on board, I began to see that we'd have guys come through the program and do so well for year and a half, 2 years. Their health could be restored. They had been clean. They took employment and moved out into apartments. But a year or so down the road, we'd see them back at the mission.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, we're missing a step here.
Huh.
And so I began to interview the individuals that were coming back, and I found out a number of reasons. One would be just the pressures of life. So, things are going well, but all of a sudden there's a health crisis and additional expenses, or a vehicle would break down and additional expenses where financially things would begin to unravel, and the stresses, and then an eviction, and they would tend to revert back to the long, deep standing methods of medicating themselves, and it would lead to serious relapse. And as I looked into it, I realized that's pretty standard across the board in all recovery. 85%, and that was exactly what we were experiencing, of our graduates were experiencing, there was recidivism. They were coming back, 85%.
Wow.
And I was like, we've got to do something different. It really hit home when one of the guys that was here, he grew up in my hometown, and his dad was the high school football coach. So I knew the family. I didn't know him. Very successful man, had his own insurance agency and a beautiful home, beautiful family. But his addiction, all that unraveled, and he ended up at the Muncie Mission. And did really well. He finished the program. He left and took a job with a local municipality. But within 30 days, his dad called and said, "We can't reach him. Will you do a welfare check?" And we discovered that there had been a fatal relapse.
Oh, man.
That incident, I was like, okay. I had also just read a study and had saw some MRI images of a healing brain of an addict, and that it could take 3 to 5 years for a brain of an addict to heal. And I was like, okay, well, we've got these guys in for a year or two. we're sending them back out, and they're not fully they're not they're sober, but they're not really healed yet. They're not healed.
It's almost like
And
somebody's broken a leg, and you don't even put a cast on it. It's just like, yeah, like it'll be all right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So so his death just it. I was actually speaking at his funeral, and it just hit me. What if we were to buy properties adjacent from the mission and provide long-term housing for the individual as they are reintegrating back into their society with employment and their networks and so forth? And talked to the board in 2015, and we set a goal to buy 1 square block from the mission, and we thought it'd probably take 30 years to do it. Well, we acquired quite a few properties in just the first year. And let me just preface to say most of those were abandoned, boarded up. We were in an area of extreme blight, as you had said earlier in the program. There was so much deindustrialization in this area, and this was the workforce for many of the industry, and now it's gone, and there's just so much blight. So property was available, abandoned properties, and so we began to purchase. That spread to 2 square blocks, and then we went to 3, and now 44, and I close on 3 more on Monday.
Oh wow.
On these properties. What we discovered is that, well, we renovated the homes completely. We didn't just go in and fresh paint them. We made them new. Every single one we took down to the studs, new wiring, new plumbing, new infrastructure, and rebuilt them into beautiful homes. We made each one 2-bedroom, 2-bath, so they would be shared, but they each would have their own private space, and began to move people in. Since 2016 to today, and I don't know what the long-term stats are going to be, but we have had a 98% success rate of the individuals that have moved into these homes, where they're stable, they're sober, some are leading recovery groups, another is serving on his church board. I mean, they're becoming influential and leaders in their community, and these were once homeless people wandering the streets of Muncie. And so this compels us that we must do more. This supportive wraparound services through that recovery period, beyond that 5 years, is what's critical. So we have 5 new homes under construction right now. It's the first of any new development that's been done in this part of town in probably 40, 50 years. And beautiful homes nearing completion.
So I wish I had like sound effects or like an audience that could just like applause. Like, I mean, just like that stat. When you shared it with this government leader, it was just like, huh, like what? Because the state is it's not seeing anything like that. And I love this thought. I mean, it's just the church being the church, it's being a community of believers. They finish the program, but then they live in community. They continue to be able to come to chapel, to be around folks. And I think everyone that works in the space knows the tendency to just go back to a peer group. And then why do they end back? And same folks, same pressures, they just fall right back into it. So helping them rewire their brain in Christian community, like who knew that would do it. So that was one of the key things I just wanted to share. That's such an amazing model. And I'm beginning to see other ministries do that. And we talk often about like literal transformation that you can see powered by the gospel. I mean, you're literally changing the zip code in a way that people can visually see there. And so it's been so encouraging. Every time I come back, there's like, wow, Frank's been busy. He's been doing a lot. I know we've gone on for a bit here. Just kind of one last piece I would love to just get a little bit of information on the listeners is that you have collaborated with a group of other organizations there to not just have those houses for folks that are kind of going through the program, but my understanding would be an actual either apartment complex or housing dedicated for mental health, especially for youth that are struggling. Could you explain just a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this group that started meeting to save the organization that is now the Muncie Hub, um, we became committed to work together. And a few years ago, we walked through a strategic plan to address homelessness. And one of the just audacious and bodacious projects that was on there, but it was a need, was permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing is housing that is vouchered, it's funded, it provides housing for individuals who can or are able to live independently, but they need other supportive services around them. So it's a project mandated by HUD or provided by HUD that provides housing and support services on site. And that was one of our objectives, is to increase that in Muncie, but that's, was like a $15 million project. So talked with the city, and because of the relationship that we have developed with our mayor and our community of development, and by the way, it's been 2 different mayors, so we just are intentional in making those relationships with the chief of police, with the chief of the fire department. We want to be a resource to our community. And so they see us as that. And so as we were laying out this project, they committed a large fund, 1.5 million to it, and said, let's go together and put an RFP out for a developer and see what we could find. So we did. The Muncie Mission and the city of Muncie put this RFP out. We received proposals. We found a developer and worked with him. Then we submitted an application. We identified some properties as well, and then submitted an application to the state of Indiana for what they call a housing institute. And a housing institute is they only accept 4 or 5 cities a year or projects a year. And we were selected. And so we went through that institute with a developer, and they were prepared. The funding has, let me be clear, the funding has not been granted yet, but we understand that they were prepared to grant 3 of the projects. Wow. In the final submission, only 2 projects were submitted. And so we feel very strongly that we're going to get those tax credits. It's going to be 15 plus million. And the mission has purchased or is purchasing an old elementary school that was built in 1900. We've had the state look at it. I've got some inspectors coming on Monday to do some more inspections. But that is going to be turned into 14 family permanent supportive units. There's another site then that is going to be renovated to become a homeless youth center. It's primarily for kids exiting the foster system, and will provide supportive services and housing for them. And then a new build just a mile or so from the mission here that will include another 30 units. So I've also, through this, another developer out of Indianapolis, and they do work all over the country, approached us, and we became the nonprofit partner for a 60 apartment unit here in Muncie. And so our clients get preference on placement in those units. And so There's some discussion for even broader opportunities with that developer that could really change the focus of not the focus, but enhance the work that we do.
Yeah, so as listeners can tell, Frank just has way too much spare time on his hands. Like, who knew you were going to be like a real estate developer at this point?
Right.
And I do mention it for some listeners, of course, as God calls us to different things, some might be like, wow, this is a lot of partnership with government. But I think he does call us into different ways. And I think, the point of this podcast is, what can we do next? Maybe another part of it is like, what could we do different to make a difference? And you're literally transforming that zip code. Growth then begets growth. That begets interest. And listeners may remember the conversation with Pastor Matt Tice from Liberty Baptist in Las Vegas about how changing a zip code then it can attract development, can attract investment, and then continue that growth. So all of these things are just incredible. I know you also do some mental health work for folks in the area, but just wanted to kind of get that kind of global view. Now, I've gone through kind of a battery of questions. Anything that you think would be helpful for listeners to know that maybe I had missed?
Well, I would address our listeners this way, because I sit in the seat of probably many of your listeners. A believer committed to Christ, trying to find how do we influence our community, and remain faithful to the gospel. And I just want to, I think part of that evolution process that I went through, scripture that I've read 100 times just took on special meaning to me, like out of Luke chapter 4, where, after Christ has been in the desert and he makes his way back to Galilee and then to Nazareth, his hometown, and goes into the synagogue and steps up and unrolls the scroll and reads his first words back in his hometown, and everybody's listening because they've all heard about him. So I'm sure there was great anticipation. What is he going to say? What's he going to read? And he reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim the good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom to the prisoners and to restore sight to the blind." And so I think that's really where we're supposed to be. Now, I know we've got discipleship and we need to maintain our doctrine and so forth. But, when we read in Matthew 25, when, he talks about the shepherd that separated the people, or he separated the people like the shepherd separated the sheep and the goats. And he said, blessed are those, come take your inheritance. And he said, for when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. And we all know how, it ends well. They say, well, when did we do that?
Well,
when you did it to the least of these.
Amen.
We live in a society and in a culture that is not like the one I grew up in. Christianity is unknown. It is amazing that I encounter our clients and people in our space that I work with, other providers who have no concept of Christ nor the gospel. And this has provided me in gentle ways to show what the gospel looks like, okay, to show what grace looks like, to demonstrate it. If we demonstrate it before we tell them, when we tell them, they've got a concept, right? If you have no concept of grace, how will you know what that looks like when we're talking about it? So Amen. Let's demonstrate grace. Let's demonstrate the good news, and also to people in high places. They need to hear it too.
Well, I just think of in a society that often doesn't want to listen to us, we're just going to show you the love of Jesus. And it's certainly in Jesus's own ministry model, there was the care for those physical needs. And yeah, so I was just so blessed by the example of what your ministry is doing. Still amazed, even today, I'm learning new things that you're you're a part of. And so I love that kingdom entrepreneurship that's going on there. Frank, if you had a billboard on which to put a message to the gospel preaching church, what would you put on it?
Yeah, it would. I would put. I think it would take some explanation, but it would be Jesus cared for the broken, so should we. And Josh, where that comes from is sitting in committee after committee. I'm working on a committee now that's developing a strategic plan for our city and our county. And I'm working on the housing component of that plan. But I sit and I look in these committee meetings and I just say, where is the body of Christ? I am convinced, without a shadow of a doubt, that if we will come out of our silos, come out of our churches, come together, join forces, collaborate, okay, I would challenge churches, please don't try to start your own clothing pantry. It's a lot of work, and your volunteers, send your volunteers to an agency in town that's already doing it and do it on a bigger scale. And then let's show the world what the whole body of Christ looks like, not just individual parts. And as the body of Christ, without question and without doubt, we can change the world and impact our society in incredible ways.
Amen. Amen to that. So, well, Frank, thank you for your example. Even today, I'm just inspired. Thank you for letting God lead you in these ways and stepping into those uncomfortable places, and then kind of paving the way here for not just believers, but also for those government officials that I've been able to personally witness as you share with them. Here's what the gospel does, and just to see, like, wow, this is amazing. So I so appreciate the opportunity to partner with you. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Josh.